Hi, I'm Glen Nelson. Behind me on this wall are a collection of magazine covers that Utah-born John Held Jr. created in New York from 1919 to around 1933. They're extraordinary to me and I love them so much. Shall I tell you what my favorite one is? This one here from Life magazine is a tattooed man, but if you get up really close to it, all of the tattoos have to do with Yale, because these are all college-related covers. For whatever reason, that just completely cracks me up. One of the things that I find extraordinary about these covers is how widely they were seen. This was the era when cartoonists were kind of like rock stars. They were rich and influential and famous, and Held was no exception. But what you wouldn't know from looking at these covers is what's inside of them and Held's contribution to them. So in addition to the covers, he's also writing journalism inside, humorous essays, creating additional cartoons. He's doing the illustrations for advertisements and commercial work. Then in the 1920s, toward the end of the decade, he starts writing fine art fiction. And it's not the humorous stuff that you would imagine, but rather serious, dramatic works that for me are a foreshadow of the Great Depression. So think about that. Covers, cartooning, illustration, commercial work, fiction, all from one guy. I can't think of anybody today who has that kind of reach, can you? The amazing thing, too, for me, is he's funny. Extra credit for that. John Held left Utah and went to New York in 1912 with $4 in his pocket. Just a few years later, he would be a multi-millionaire, but it didn't come right all at once. He tried to do some commercial work for department stores, and it didn't really take off. But then he served in World War I, and when he came back, the Jazz Age was just beginning. In fact, he did the cover illustration for F. Scott Fitzgerald's seminal collection of short stories, Tales of the Jazz Age. Anyway, at that point, his career was so crazy. It was like this runaway freight train, and he couldn't stop it. The problem with that was he wanted to be a fine artist, but simply didn't have the time. In fact, when he started writing short stories, there was always a character in the short stories that was a tortured cartoonist. And the running joke was that he was chained to his desk and had no time of his own, which is sort of true for Held himself. But then the Great Depression came, and the colorful, freestyling, youth-centered, college-age illustrations went out of style almost immediately. That was sort of bad for the rest of the country. They were suddenly lining up in soup kitchens, living in shanty towns, riding the rails, trying to find jobs unsuccessfully all over the country. But for Held, it was kind of good news, because he finally had time to create fine artwork, which is what he said was his vice, something he had wanted to do since childhood. So behind me is a series of watercolors from the mid-1930s of New York, his favorite place, and since I'm a New Yorker, my favorite place. So this work here is the Empire State Building. The thing to remember about Held is he's a storyteller from start to finish. In fact, what is a cartoon but a perfect little short story? So what is the story that he's trying to tell us with this piece? The Empire State Building was created in a miraculous amount of time, 1 year, 45 days, if you can imagine it. So I see in this work a lot of hope. You would think that it might not be, because it's right from the Depression, the early days of the Depression, but he imbues it with the hope of a sunrise. You love it, right? I love it.